Most books, by their very nature, have some sort of didactic purpose. Whether that's teaching ABCs, showing family dynamics, or social constructs, all books can be used as an example of something to a child. At a time when understanding and empathy are an essential tool to navigate the multicultural world we live in, the publishing industry is struggling to deal with historical events and the characteristics of society that are often deemed taboo, too complicated and difficult to explain, or just too upsetting for a child to deal with. Often, instead of finding a meaningful way to construct a narrative around sensitive issues, the children's publishing world is whitewashing and sanitising real events and cultural anchors to make stories and history more palatable. The problem appears to lie in a lack of inherent understanding of how to construct a sensitive narrative or account that isn't offensive. This can be attributed to a lack of diversity in the industry, which means that it's mainly white, middle-class people making decisions about what is important to the whole of society. The ramifications of that mean that children are getting their education from a source with no emotional, cultural, or societal link to the contexts. Two recent cases that highlight this problem from different viewpoints are Scholastic's decision to pull a birthday cake for George Washington from sale just 12 days after publication, and Barrington Stoke's controversial decision to republish Deadly Letter, complete with racial slurs, 14 years after making its debut appearance, which resulted in one primary school banning the book after parental complaints made national news in the UK.
The book, titled A Birthday Cake for George Washington, follows one of the president's slaves, Hercules, and his daughter, Delia. They're trying to make the president a cake, but find themselves in quite a bind when they run out of sugar. According to Scholastic's description, the book is based on real events and underscores their relationship as they are faced with an unspoken, bittersweet reality. Probably a little too unspoken, considering the real-life Hercules successfully escaped Mount Vernon. And the book has already received more than 100 one-star reviews on Amazon. People have written things like, "There is no such thing as nice slavery. Please don't let your children read this," and "Is it possible to give 0 stars?" In a statement, Scholastic admitted the book may give a false impression of the reality of the lives of slaves and should therefore be withdrawn.
On January 19, 2018, the bookseller raised an article on their website about how a complaint from a parent resulted in Greswold Primary School in Solihull banning a book. They said, Hoffman and Barrington Stoke responded by defending the book, saying the context of the word being used was appropriate and not meant to cause offence. The book tells the story of a girl called Pretty who, upon starting a new school, finds herself excluded from some children's playground games and bullied by other children in the classroom. The publisher said it has every confidence in Hoffman's ability to tackle the difficult subject of playground racism and bullying truthfully and with sensitivity. A spokesman for the publisher told the bookseller, through her own determination, spirit and ability to find friendship in unexpected places, Pretty starts to feel more at home. In the context of this story, the word P*KI is very deliberately used, in order to show the racism with which Pretty is confronted and the impact that this racist vocabulary has on her. These instances are polar opposites in terms of their approach to cultural diversity and keeping it real. But why is there such a disparity in their methods? Is this simply because there's a lack of diversity behind the scenes, or is greater clarification required for publishing professionals on how to present their stories and historical events? Publishing stalwart and diversity champion Margaret Busby has continuously campaigned and worked for diversity within the industry and was a founding member of Greater Access to Publishing, which worked for increased Black representation in the UK publishing industry. She is the patron of independent Black publishers and was recently quoted in The Guardian in 2018 as saying, "Mainstream publishing is too institutionalised in its biases to be corrected by a few new authors or schemes." Speaking about the various attempts at bringing diversity to the industry through Arts Council-funded initiatives and other schemes realised in the late 90s, she continued to say, "What's happening now is more initiatives, but the problem can't be solved with initiatives." The Publishers Association have developed a list of pointers on how to ensure publishing professionals are working in an inclusive way. This has led to mainstream publishers creating diversity-centric positions and committing to try harder. But Busby points out that this is old ground, and once the champions in the important positions move on, things always revert back to how they were before. This suggests that retention in these positions is not long-term, and that there aren't enough candidates to fill the positions on offer when they swing around again. So why is diversity so important all of a sudden? Data from the UK shows that exposure to adversity in the early years of life is associated with higher levels of childhood mental health problems such as depression and anxiety and altered brain structure in adolescence. This excerpt from Liverpool City Council's Public Health Report is noteworthy because, due to our withdrawal from the European Union, we are about to enter a second period of financial insecurity before we've had time to recover from the period of austerity that was declared by George Osborne in 2010. This means that lots more children will face adversity within their early years, not just in Liverpool but all over the UK. Brexit was also a harbinger of a xenophobic uprising within the UK, with racial incidents and hate crime up by 41% according to figures recorded by the Home Office. Not only does this present an opportunity to speak openly with our children about these issues, but it also presents us with a moral obligation to provide them with the tools to bring about change. That's where the publishing industry can truly make a difference with diverse stories that reflect real life rather than setting children up to fail and portraying only what we want them to see, only the good. It's a sad fact of life that bad things happen to good people. Refugees exist, death happens, disease happens, abuse happens. We don't have to write issue books that have their own special section at the library. The industry just has to start putting books out there that show diverse characters from diverse backgrounds with diverse cultures, doing the same things as the characters in children's books have always done. Be brave, be funny, be sad, be happy, be curious, be scared, be unafraid to ask questions. Essentially, be themselves. It could be argued that this has always been the case, but now more than ever it's necessary to write books that encourage children to develop a sense of self-awareness and empathy. I spoke to Miranda McKinney of Empathy Lab UK and asked why she thought it was so important the changes brought about via the publishing industry and what that change could mean to our children and society as a whole.
And the whole thing, particularly about diversity in publishing, as I'm sure you've picked up, and this has been a kind of rumbling thing for, about the last 20 years, but what I'm seeing now is, real change being made, particularly about recruitment, and being sure that publishers have the right kind of staff who are going to commission and have connection with all sorts of communities so that writing will reflect all sorts of communities. So it's a kind of long game to play, but I think most people feel that having publishing houses that are more representative of the population in all its diversity, not just racially, but in all sorts of ways, will, in the long run, start to address that, some of the worries.
Yeah. Empathy and resilience are words used a lot in relation to the emotional well-being and mental health of children. Responding to a report on suicide by children and young people by the University of Manchester's National Confidential Inquiry into Suicide and Homicide by People with Mental Illness, Samaritan CEO Ruth Sutherland said, "We need to build young people's resilience, starting at school. This is an important part of personal, social, health and economic education, which should be a statutory element of the national curriculum, supported by staff training." This view is shared by many education professionals globally. As more research is carried out exploring the effects of children's books and resources aimed at developing empathy from a young age, academics are relating that back to high-quality literature that ultimately fosters resiliency and coping skills. This places a firm responsibility with publishers to rethink the titles they have on offer. Organisations such as Empathy Lab UK, Inclusive Minds and Book Trust offer reading lists with guidance on discussions to be had in response to difficult passages and interactions read as a group to start meaningful conversations. In our ever-changing cultural landscape, we need to present opportunities for young people to naturally think about how their actions impact upon others. How it feels to be a refugee or to have a disability, be part of a minority or just different from the majority of the local population in some way. Bereavement, social isolation or withdrawal, and bullying are 3 of 10 common themes in suicide by children and young people. Showing diverse characters from a range of backgrounds in real-life situations involving loss, abuse, social unrest, or any difficult situation can possibly offer some reassurance to those feeling isolated that they are not alone. This can also encourage those from backgrounds where these issues are less likely to have had adverse effects to step into the shoes of their peers and express empathy. The use of a derogatory term used by another child towards the main character in Mary Hoffman's Deadly Letter isn't setting an example for children to follow. It's laying the table for an open conversation about what racial slurs and insults make the person on the receiving end feel like, and allowing children to empathise with the protagonist they care for. The term is symbolic of all slurs, racial or otherwise, that would be upsetting to the person targeted. If publishers fail to represent and acquire more stories from and about diverse backgrounds, it sends a message that certain people and situations don't exist or are less important, or that you don't fit, or the book isn't for you. What if every book isn't for you? A mind that is nurtured in empathy and understanding can bring about change. So why do children's publishing professionals dilute, whitewash and sanitize literature to make for a happy ending outcome or theme? Is it because there isn't enough diversity behind the scenes? Equality in Publishing conducted research on the barriers to entering the industry, and one answer was prevalent: financing internships. The majority of free or badly paid internships in the industry favour those with a family support network who will effectively fund and support the placement and candidate. And this mainly means white middle-class families. So what is the industry doing to change the white middle-class culture that has dominated the industry for years? Matt Hancock, Minister of State for Creative Industries, gave a keynote speech at London Book Fair in 2017 which addressed the issue directly, stating, "Significant strides towards diversity and inclusivity in publishing have been made in recent years. HarperCollins' BAME scheme, Penguin Pride, Little Brown's new inclusive imprint, Dialogue Books, to name just a few. These bold initiatives mark progress on diversity in the publishing industry, and I look forward to seeing their outcomes." The industry can be updated to reflect the society that we live in. There is always room for fantasy tales. Nobody wants a library full of issue books, just enough books that give opportunity for discussion and to develop a sense of empathy that will in turn help children to become more resilient and aware of how everyone is different, with a varied range of situations. Publishers are thankfully getting on board and creating positions that are centred on diversity and filled by candidates from diverse cultural backgrounds, but there is a long way to go. Organisations such as Empathy Lab UK are involving educators and developing strategies on how to make change within the industry. They're researching new ways of how to use books to show empathy through literature in a sustainable way that allows discussion and difficult conversations to be had in a controlled environment. This is encouraging and suggests that the industry is listening and prepared to make changes at boardroom level to help equip children for a diverse and inclusive future.